Montana Territory, winter of 1869. The week before Christmas was consumed by a blizzard that cut like knives across the open plains, driving snow into furious swirls that obscured the horizon. Miles from the nearest settlement, the vast white landscape appeared untouched by time, silent, solemn, and unforgiving. At the edge of that stillness stood a woman, my Lynn. She pulled her thin wool shawl tighter around her neck, her worn boots crunching through the deep snow as she approached the dark outline of a ranch house. Alone in a new country after a series of broken promises left her impoverished, a matrimonial agency had been her final option. Her gloved hand trembled as she lifted it to knock. Before her knuckles could make contact with the wood, the heavy door creaked open. A tall man filled the doorway. His eyes, slate gray and as cold as the wind, scrutinized her as if she were a phantom. The lines around his mouth were taut, his coat hanging open just enough for her to catch a glimpse of a worn revolver on his hip. My Lynn steadied her voice, the English words feeling alien and fragile in the biting cold. "I am My Lynn," she stated. "I was sent here by the Missouri Matrimonial Agency. I am to marry a Mr. Carter." The man blinked slowly, then his jaw tightened. "My name is Owen Garrett," he said, his voice a low rumble. "And I did not request a bride." A gust of wind struck her back, but My Lynn held her ground. "There must be a mistake," she insisted. "The letter said this was Red Bluff Ranch." "It is," Owen replied flatly. "But there's no Carter here." "You've arrived at the wrong ranch." He began to close the door, but My Lynn stepped forward, desperation overriding pride. "Please," she pleaded. "The storm is worsening, and the last stagecoach has departed." "I have nowhere else to go." Owen hesitated, his gaze flickering past her into the swirling snow. With a reluctant sigh, he moved aside. "You can come in, but only for the night. In the morning, you leave." She exhaled in relief, her body aching with cold and exhaustion as she crossed the threshold. The warmth inside felt like a distant memory. The ranch house was sparse but sturdy, with a stone fireplace crackling and rough-hewn furniture. The walls seemed to whisper of years without joy. She placed her small travel trunk near the door and looked around. On the mantel, half-dusted, was a woman's portrait. "My wife, Clara," Owen said stiffly, following her gaze. "She passed away 3 years ago." Before My Lynn could offer her condolences, soft footsteps stopped them both. Out of the shadows of a nearby room, 3 small figures emerged. They were identical triplet girls, no more than 7 years old, with their father's serious eyes and hair the color of wheat, though it was unbrushed and tangled. They moved as one, their gazes fixed on My Lynn. Owen froze, his hand instinctively going to his side, not for his gun, but for steadiness. The girls walked straight toward My Lynn. Then, one of them, her tiny fingers reaching out to clutch the edge of My Lynn's skirt, broke a 3-year silence. In a soft, breathy whisper, the child, Lily, spoke. "God finally sent you to us." The room became still. Owen's breath caught in his throat. He took a staggered step forward. "Lily?" The little girl said nothing more, but her grip on My Lynn's skirt tightened as her 2 sisters, Sarah and Anna, huddled closer, pressing against the warmth of the stranger. Owen knelt slowly, disbelief etched on his face. "They haven't spoken," he murmured, his voice cracking. Not since he didn't complete the sentence. The words were too heavy. My Lynn knelt down to be at eye level with the girls. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is My Lynn." One of the other girls, Anna, with trembling lips, asked a question that broke the silence. "Are you going to leave, too?" My Lynn's heart fractured like ice. She touched the girl's cheek. "No," she stated. "Not tonight." Owen stood silently, his hands clenched, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. Looking at My Lynn, his voice softened for the first time. "Stay," he requested. "At least until the storm passes." The blizzard closed the roads in silence, and the days blended together. Owen, a man of few words, informed her she could remain until the weather improved. He maintained his distance, yet his actions were considerate. He added extra logs to the fire before she woke and repaired a loose window pane in her room. He performed these tasks without speaking, and Mai Lin understood it was his way of communicating. The triplets, meanwhile, began to flourish. Initially, they stayed at the edge of the room, observing her with quiet intensity. Sarah, the artist among them, started leaving folded pieces of paper for her. The first was a drawing of 3 small stick figures with blonde hair holding the hands of a woman with long, dark hair. Above them, a bright sun, and something written in shaky letters, Mama. Mai Lin pressed the paper to her chest, her breath catching. Soon, the girls would climb into her lap as she read to them, their small fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. Inside, through the window, Owen would watch them, his stoic expression unreadable. The house was healing, perhaps, but it was not yet complete. One afternoon, while searching for extra blankets, Owen discovered an unsealed letter tucked within Mai Lin's trunk. He shouldn't have opened it, but the quiet of the house fostered a restless curiosity. The handwriting was delicate, but the words were deeply impactful. Her injuries have healed sufficiently. However, the trauma to her abdomen has caused permanent damage. The likelihood of bearing children is minimal to non-existent. He folded the letter slowly, as if it were made of glass. That night, as Mai Lin gazed into the glowing embers of the fire, he spoke. I found a letter today. Her shoulders tensed. I was a nurse, she began, her voice barely audible. During the war. Not by training, but out of necessity, she recounted an explosion, a wound that had taken more than just her physical self. They said I was fortunate to survive, but the harm was done. I will never have children of my own. Owen looked at her, not with pity, but with unwavering respect. There are visible scars, he said softly, and others that remain concealed. But I believe you've survived better than anyone I have ever known. For the first time, she felt acknowledged not as something broken, but as someone whole. The fragile piece was broken by a drawing. Mai Lin discovered it folded beneath Sarah's pillow. The lines were jagged, frantic. A small female figure stood at the edge of the page, her arms extended. Near her, a looming shadow of a man dragged another woman away. Beside them, a third figure lay on the ground, with 3 crooked words scrawled above him, Pa is sleep. That evening, she showed it to Owen. He took one look and slowly sat down. I've never inquired, she began carefully. What happened to your wife? His voice was quiet, but every word carried the weight of a heavy stone. I was intoxicated. There had been a disagreement. When I awoke the following morning, there was blood on my shirt. On the wooden floorboards near the back entrance. My wife was gone. He massaged his temples. The sheriff arrived, asking questions. They classified it as a disappearance. Others in town were not so certain. Do you believe you harmed her? Mai Lin inquired gently. His jaw tightened. I do not know. I have attempted to recall, but there is nothing. Only the hangover and that accursed blood. Haunted by the drawing and Owen's admission, Mai Lin walked to a nearby small house belonging to a widow named Mrs. Gable, a woman said to be partially blind but as sharp as cold winter air. Mai Lin explained the little she knew. Mrs. Gable listened, swaying gently on her heels. That night, she finally stated, I heard something, a shriek around midnight. The next morning, I observed footprints in the snow leading from their dwelling down the ridge. Only one set. Mai Lin asked. 2, the elderly woman responded. But only one returned. She confessed she never told the sheriff the complete truth, as he was Owen's relative and did not desire a scandal. Mai Lin stood in the doorway, the wind whipping at her cloak, her mind racing. Footprints, a scream, and children who remembered more than anyone thought possible. The past was not deceased. It had merely been dormant. When the snow began to thaw, a horseman approached the ranch. As the man dismounted, Mai Lin observed a face aged by years, but something about him felt perilous. My name is Corbin, he stated, his eyes like corroded nails. I used to work at this place a few years ago. The moment the triplets saw him from the doorway, they stiffened in unison and rushed back inside, disappearing down the corridor. My Lin found them huddled beneath a bed, trembling violently. Sarah grabbed a piece of charcoal and frantically sketched on the floorboards, a woman, 3 children, a man with a blade, blood. It was the same shadowy figure from her drawings. My Lin's heart pounded. She turned for the rifle mounted above the fireplace, but before her hands could reach it, the door burst open. It was Corbin. "They recall, do they not?" he said with an unsettling calmness. The little ones witnessed it. He smiled, a chilling expression devoid of warmth. She was not supposed to be present. Neither were the children. "But your man, Owen?" He was too deeply intoxicated to see clearly. Corbin stepped forward, extracting a knife from beneath his coat. "Cannot risk them speaking now." My Lin's hand darted for the rifle, but he was quicker, knocking it aside. He seized her by the arm, pushed her to the ground, and raised the knife. Then, a swift movement. The triplets darted from the hallway, screaming in sheer terror. "No!" My Lin twisted, throwing herself between the man and the girls just as the blade descended. The steel cut deeply, and she collapsed, blood spreading across her bodice. "My Lin!" Owen's voice roared from the doorway. The sharp sound of his rifle shattered the air, and Corbin stumbled backward, clutching his side. Owen kicked the knife away and knelt beside My Lin. Blood saturated the floor. "Stay with me," he said in a rough voice. My Lin's eyes fluttered open as the girls crawled next to her, crying uncontrollably. Then, through the suffocating sobs, came the sound that broke everything. "Mama," they screamed together. "Mama, don't leave." With the girl's shaky testimony, the truth was revealed, and Corbin was arrested for the murder of Clara Garrett. But nothing was more important in those hours than My Lin's struggle to survive. Owen hardly left her side, staying up through the nights, whispering her name, pleading with her to hold on. The triplets were a constant, gentle presence, imitating his actions by placing damp cloths on her forehead. One evening, looking at him with eyes much older than her age, Lily whispered, "She's our mama now," and Owen, broken and out of breath, could no longer deny it. He leaned down, pressed My Lin's hand to his lips, and said, "You saved us all." As her wound healed, a pain grew inside My Lin. She could not stay, not when she could never give Owen what his first wife had, children of his own blood. One morning, she sat down and wrote a letter. "Dear Owen, you have given me a warmth I never thought I'd feel again. But I am not complete. I cannot have children, and you and the girls deserve someone who can give you a real future. Please know that I love you all, but love is not always enough." She placed it on the mantelpiece and began to pack. It was Sarah who found the letter. She saw the words, "I cannot be their mother," and her small chest tightened. She didn't cry. She woke her sisters, and together they put on their boots and quietly slipped out into the snow. When My Lin noticed the front door ajar, panic gripped her. "Owen," she screamed, rushing outside as he returned from the barn. "They're gone." "They read the letter?" Without a word, he saddled a horse and lifted My Lin up behind him. The storm was returning, engulfing the horizon in white, blurring the tiny tracks in the snow. They called until their throats were sore, but only silence answered. Just before nightfall, My Lin spotted a splash of color between the trees. There, huddled beneath a twisted pine, lay the 3 girls, arms wrapped around each other, cheeks pale, eyes barely open. "My babies," My Lin choked out, falling to her knees. Lily's lips trembled. "You don't want us anymore." My Lin pulled them close, cradling them with shaking arms. "No," she whispered, pressing her forehead to the child's. "I was never leaving you. I thought I was protecting you. But I was wrong." Owen knelt beside them, wrapping his coat around them all, his hands trembling. "Don't you ever run from us again," he said, his voice cracking. "You're our little girls." Their small arms locked around My Lin's neck. "I want you to be my mama forever," they whispered. And My Lin, crying now, held them tighter. "Then I will be," she said. "Forever." The next morning, the storm had passed. Owen asked My Lin and the girls to take a walk. At the creek, he stopped. I've been thinking, he said, about what makes a family. He pulled his wedding band from his finger. Clara is gone, and I loved her. But loving her doesn't mean I stop living. He looked at my Lynn, his voice soft. The girls need a mother, and I need you. Family isn't about where we come from. It's about where we choose to stay. Then he dropped to one knee. I choose you, my Lynn. Will you marry me? She knelt beside him, embracing the triplets who had gathered close. I thought I was only good at leaving, she whispered. Owen took her hand. But you stayed, he said. And so will I, she nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry you. 1 week later, the small church in Fort Banner was filled with townspeople offering warm glances and quiet blessings. Owen stood at the altar, visibly nervous. Then the doors opened. My Lynn entered in a borrowed dress, but it was the triplets who turned every head, walking proudly ahead of her, scattering wildflower petals with a joy only a child could possess. When the preacher asked who gave the bride away, the 3 girls spoke in unison, their voices clear and strong. We do. Laughter filled the room. After the vows, the 3 walked out together into the sun, no longer separate souls bound by grief, but a family united by grace. That night, as the fire crackled low and the girls slept peacefully between them, my Lynn stared at the ceiling with quiet wonder. She wasn't born to be a mother, but in a house where so much had been lost, she had been called to become one. And finally, everything felt found.